Welcome back to another episode of the Six Sessions. As I've mentioned countless times in the past, this is my favorite part of the week, as I get to spend a chunk of the time on a Friday afternoon with people at the frontier of growth. It also looks like I'm doing real work on a Friday afternoon. Today, we're turning our focus to the heartbeat of any business, sales. But we're not just talking about any sales. We're talking about software sales in the digital age and, importantly, how technology can enhance sales teams' performance. Hey, Ryan, excited to have you on. Welcome to this week's Six Sessions.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
In today's session, we're going to hone in on the challenges of sales in the software space. We're going to look at the innovative approaches needed to surmount modern-day target-hindering hurdles. I don't know why I keep doing this. I always write sentences. It's going to be super hard to say, but I think I got through that one. We're going to talk about sales management, but in particular, how the old model of managing sales teams is becoming antiquated. We'll hopefully shed light on how we're breaking away from the old and embracing the new. We'll explore what it takes to lead a high-performing sales team, how to instill positive behaviors, and how to provide the right support and tools for each team member to succeed. Our guest today is someone who's been navigating the fast-paced world of software sales for years, making his mark at Vidyard and HyperComply to then take a challenge and turn it into a SaaS shaped opportunity. He's a leader who's unequivocally about the fact that coaching and empowerment should be at the heart of sales leadership, and someone who has proven that's how you deliver growth time and time again. We're going to talk about software sales, leadership, real-time sales assistant, and perhaps even a little bit about podcasting. The 6 sessions have given me the chance to engage with some of the most innovative minds in the growth space, and today's guest perfectly fits that mold. He's a software sales leader turned entrepreneur who has harnessed his experiences to create solutions to challenges that many sales leaders face. If you're passionate about transforming sales performance and driving growth, then brace yourself for the next 30 minutes. As always, our conversations will be concise, engaging, and full to the brim with insights. And of course, it's completely unfiltered, which is part of its charm. Joining us from the heart of Canada's tech corridor, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Ryan Frampton, CEO and co-founder of SalesQ. Ryan, welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much. Very nice intro there. I appreciate it.
It's honestly my favorite part of doing these each week. And it's I try and trip myself up with ridiculously hard sentences to say, but I also try and find like in jokes and things like that, and kind of like little Easter eggs and part of the process. I also make them really long so that as people are joining, we're not missing any of the insight from the people who are actually here to talk sense. So first off, to get things started, Threads or Twitter, who's going to win the fight?
I'm a big Elon Musk guy. My nickname as a BDR was Elon for whatever reason at Vidyard. I think Shika, my first manager, gave me that. So I got to bet on Twitter. I think Threads will be successful as well, but I don't think it'll make Twitter go away.
And what about the actual rumored physical fight? Who do you think's winning that one?
Oh man, I think that's Zuckerberg. I feel like I saw an Instagram picture where Musk had George St. Pierre over at his house doing training. So I don't know if it's going to happen, but if it does, it will be pretty interesting.
I would love that to be how the fight between Twitter and Threads gets sorted out, just like a physical brawl. Anyway, so I've tried to eloquently sum it up in my intro, but tell us who you are and what your role is at SalesQ.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a nutshell, I'm a sales leader in the software space. That's what I've been doing throughout my career. At SalesQ now, I am the head of product, head of sales / CEO. So I'm kind of everything as we're really in like our pre-seed stage. So we're brand new, growing like crazy. And yeah, it's a lot of fun, but it's not just being a sales leader anymore. I kind of have to worry about everything now.
How's that transition from sales leader, part of the machine, to being the machine?
It's eye-opening, that's for sure. I'm sure you know about it too. It's yeah, you have to sit down with your accountants every so often. You have to worry about not just bringing in the revenue, but what happens with it too. But yeah, I really enjoy it. Like, we're talking to sales leaders all day long, so it's nice that we're not selling something to a persona that I don't know anything about. Like, it's kind of like talking to just my colleagues all day, which is a lot of fun.
Well, it's much nicer when you can be that kind of trusted advisor or like befriended peer in that process, as opposed to someone who's trying to flog them something. How was Q2 for you guys?
was really good. We don't have a $1 billion ARR number yet to compound like a
Yet.
HubSpot or something like that. But yeah, we grew our ARR 500% in Q2. So
Nice.
growing really fast, not without its challenges. I think after Q2, unfortunately, we saw a lot of like sales leaders get let go. So some folks in the pipeline, unfortunately, like lost their roles, and that was a big hit. So I think, yeah, we're seeing these things like crazy. Fortunately, we're still in the very much like startup phase where it's easier to compound revenue, but not without its challenges.
It's nice at the beginning when you get multiples of growth that are like ridiculous. We've just 10x our revenue. Yeah, it's good. What are some of the challenges that you're facing now that you've moved into leading a startup?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is like balancing time, where it's just like you're constantly like, we have product market fit, and now we don't have product market fit, and now I need to focus on other things. And like, it's kind of like every customer you bring on, sometimes you need to build something else to further your product market fit and widen that ability to sell. So a lot of switching back and forth in that mode. But I think even right now, like thankfully we're selling to revenue leaders and driving growth for them. But even with that, no matter what you're selling, like everything's being looked at by the CFO. Like even like if we're trying to get a $3,000 deal over the line, that's literally going to the CFO's desk. So before that would be like a $25,000 deal. Like it's a big shift. So really trying to get good at making business cases. And for a startup that's new, where you don't have a million case studies, you have 4. It's hard to sometimes convey that message, but it's something that we're learning pretty quickly on.
It's quite interesting recently, actually, because like when I reflect on it, it's that decision-making unit and the size of deals going through that to warrant different decisions has massively changed in the last 6 months. Now nearly every deal above a certain size will have a CFO or a heavy-weighted procurement team, who are my favorite people on the planet, if any of them are watching. So tell me a bit about your journey from BDR at Vidyard to becoming CEO and co-founder of SalesQ. How did that happen? Because by all accounts, I mean, I met you briefly pre-pandemic at Vidyard.
Yep.
But how have you gone from that to actually leading a tech company in the sales space?
Yeah, no, it's been a pretty wild journey. Like my parents are still like dumbfounded around like what's happening. My dad's like,
do they understand what you do yet?
I would say I'd
something with computers.
Yes, I'd give them a generous yes. But essentially what like my dad's been a factory worker for like 30 years, actually retiring this month. So like it's very foreign, just tech in general to them, but started as a BDR at Vidyard, started a marketing company selling to real estate agents before that. So I had some sales experience just to pay my way through university. So with that experience, I was able to get an AE role pretty quickly, and then ended up finding myself managing the SMB sales department at Vidyard, like 20 AEs, 3 sales leaders. Josh Kirkham, I believe you know very well.
Yeah.
One of those folks, incredible leader, now working at HubSpot. And then after a year leading that department, I actually followed a Vidyard alum who started a startup called HyperComply, helping with security questionnaire automation. I became the head of sales there. And then throughout that time, I just always had this specific problem that I was like, if nobody's going to solve it, I talked to my Gong CSM, I talked to my Chorus CSM when I was at Vidyard, and nobody seemed to be focusing on building this. So I was like, why don't I just take a crack at it?
It's Vidyard is very similar to sort of the early days of HubSpot, and this is just an external perception, is that a lot of you guys went on to create your own startups and so become founders or co-founders or join early stage teams. Do you think is that part of the makeup, or is it part of like the kind of people that Vidyard were trying to hire, or was it just something in the water in Waterloo?
Michael Litt and Devin, the co-founders of Vidyard, I think have really bred that into the culture of Vidyard.
Yeah.
We have this like concept called like every company has like their values. Some actually have their values, and some it's just like something they put on their website. But it's called like relentlessly resourceful, which I believe they got from Y Combinator through their time in there. And it's true. Like a lot of the people at Vidyard are just relentless in like making things happen. So some of the founders that have came from Vidyard alum is like Open Phone, which is like a business to business phone service. That's Vidyard alum. Bin Centuries, Vidyard alum. HyperComply. Like there's you can't even fit them on one hand. SalesQ, yeah. And then so it's just it's an environment that I think the founders have really fostered. They haven't shied away from hiring people that they know one day will start a startup. Instead, they actually like gravitate towards that.
What is it that SalesQ does? Like, how does it help sales leadership and their teams? And also part of that question as well is there's a lot of sales tech in the market. How are you different? How are you fitting in that? You talked about product market fit before. Like, where do you sit with that now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think step back and like talk about like kind of the problems I was facing at HyperComply and at Vidyard when I was a sales leader. Like you'd oftentimes have like key initiatives where you'd get that 1 hour a week that you can find time to watch a Gong call or a Chorus call or whatever call recording tool that you're using. And then you see these trends where you're like, oh, like if only my team asked these specific questions about the company's metrics, we would have been able to make a business case to the CFO. Or if only my team actually booked a next step at the end of the call, we would have not had this deal get delayed into Q3 and we would have closed that in Q2 and I wouldn't have been fired, right? Like type of thing. So there's always that problem. And I found there wasn't a really great way to take those problems that you see and get the solutions implemented. So what SalesQ does, it allows you as a sales leader to set your key initiatives from a coaching perspective that you want implemented and actually live with your rep in real time, whether they're on a Microsoft Teams call, a Google Meets call, a Zoom call, and show them that, hey, these are the coaching initiatives that you need to do. And these are the ones that you're weakest at right now. So they're getting reminded in that moment. So they're not forgetting to actually implement those critical things that you feel are going to drive revenue. And then from there, you can get analytics around which reps are actually implementing versus not. And then we integrate with the call recording platforms like Gong and Chorus, et cetera, to then showcase, hey, these are the coaching opportunities that are going to move the needle if you watch these calls. So you're not just like picking a random call recording that week and hoping it's going to be helpful. You're really diving in. And then more so why the sales reps love it is because it automates the note-taking process from a RevOps perspective. But
salespeople love admin.
Yeah, they love it. I didn't know that sales reps love taking notes during a call while they're trying to sell. That's their main job, and yet they seem to be the executive assistant too. But so we automate the note-taking process. They can set custom categories around what they want notes to be taken. They're available in real time for them to see during the call. And it's not just a massive transcript after the fact. And that integrates with HubSpot and et cetera.
Nice. And after years in sales leadership, actually scrap that question for a minute. Where did you learn how to sell? So you went from BDR through to like leading teams and like quite sizable teams. How did you learn that? Was it all on the job? Did you go through courses? Does it self-taught? Like, how did you actually become effective and learn what good sales looks like?
Yeah, so I always recommend, I actually had a call with a few folks, like people just reach out that I've managed in my career over time and just say, like, hey, like I'm trying to go from X position to Y position. What do I need to do? How do I learn that position? And I feel like what I did early in my career is less learn about sales and more learn about business. So I was reading like 50 books a year about like finance, like entrepreneurship, et cetera, when I was in university. Rather than going to my classes, I would pay my friends in beer to do my assignments. That's another story. But I would really focus on just learning about business. And then I started that marketing company in university that helped real estate agents with their advertising. So I learned how to like sell in that just by trial and error, getting told no a million times. And then from there, the person that actually taught me how to take some of that practical like business knowledge and just general acumen and make it into a defined process was really Evan Santa at Vidyard, who previously led the SMB department.
Guitar playing salesman, I remember.
Yeah, he's a fun guy. Like if you have a chance to go have a drink with Evan, like he's not just a good sales leader, he's a good chat as well.
So who, other than Evan, who are your heroes in tech and in the tech and startup world?
So I would say the folks that are like, there's of course like the heroes that are more like abstract that you've never met. Like I would say like Elon Musk is like, even though he has some different quirks to him, he's really inspiring around like just like people don't think he can do things. He says, hey, like 10% chance to achieve like SpaceX, and he just does it. I think that's really cool. But more of the practical people are like Josh Kirkham, who I managed, and we actually sat side by side as BDRs cold calling together in our first few months at Vidyard. I really look at him and from a work ethic perspective, like I wish I had his work ethic. Like I try to have his work ethic, but it's incredible. And then Dan Wardle with like, from a patient's perspective, like he's been at Vidyard for I think 12 years or something now. And he's really good at understanding like the ups and downs. So I really try to look at the people that have really helped me in my career and take the superpowers that they have and look at them as my heroes.
Katie Bentz is in the comments and she says hi.
Oh, hey, Katie.
So you've worked tech, SaaS sales. What do you think are some of the attributes that you need to succeed in sales? So you've managed teams, you've helped coach people, you now run a platform that is kind of helping people become better in their sales roles. What are some of the attributes that are needed to be successful in sales? And if you were hiring for salespeople, what would you be looking for?
Yeah, the biggest thing I look for when I hire, and some people agree with this and some people don't, but it's just like, why are you going to show up every morning and actually grind through the shitty times, right? Like right now, no sales rep is having an easy time. And that's hard to get up in the morning, especially in this remote world where you're not having your manager beside you looking to see if you're actually working. You just need to rely on that person to get themselves up and manage themselves. And I myself have to get myself up. So if I'm leading the team, I need to worry about motivating myself. I can't worry about motivating you. So I look for people that are really like self-motivated. So when you ask them like, hey, like, where do you want to be in 8 months? Or like, what specifically are you trying to achieve in the next stage of your life, personally or professionally? They don't just say like, oh, I want to be an AE. Well, like, why? Like, are you trying to save for a down payment for a house? Are you really wanting to get to a place where you can do consulting on the side or start a business and then show evidence that you're already working towards that? Okay, how much do you have saved already for your down payment? Some people are like, oh, like I want to start that later. And it's like, well, then that's not actually a real goal. If it's a real goal, you're already working towards it, and this is going to help you accelerate towards it. So I think that's the entry level. So if you want to become a doctor or a lawyer, you need to go get a fancy degree. For sale, if you want to get into software sales, you need to have that mentality to be successful. You don't need a fancy degree. And then besides that, I think you need to be super focused on being coachable. I always talk about this thing called net retention of skill. So in a software business, there's something called net retention, which is essentially you start with $1 million of ARR that you closed. How much revenue, regardless around how many customers churn, does that turn into? Does it grow like HubSpot 120% or whatever, or does it decline? Sales rep, same thing. You could teach them a few skills at the start of the quarter. Are those going to stay and add skills, or are those going to decline and then add skills? Now you're the same rep with different strengths and weaknesses. So really being coachable is important.
I love that net skill retention. How are you even tracking that? How are you benchmarking that? Or is it just I feel like this person has improved?
So before it was just nothing. Now SalesQ.
In your experience, what are some common hurdles sales leaders face when trying to maximize their team's potential?
Yeah, so I think the biggest hurdle that they face is It's twofold. So I would say one is like the ability to actually cascade what needs to be maximized. Every rep has different strengths and weaknesses, but there's typically overall themes that can help you drive up like ACV or win rate, right? Like we talked about budget freezes and CFOs being on every call. I think that's what's literally every sales org is facing right now. So I think the biggest hurdle that they face is being able to actually get their suggestions implemented, and not just for a week. There's a Forrester study where 90% of sales training is forgotten within 30 days after the training's given. That is the biggest hurdle that any sales leader needs to overcome right now. Is I want to get my team good for a quarter, so I give a quarterly training, but then only a third of that quarter, 1 month, where they're actually implementing that training. The other 2 months, it's already out the window and they're just in the Wild West. So I think that's the biggest thing. But then I think that shifts to the empathy of that, right? They have a million things going on, right? Those sales reps, they have their own life, their own personal finances, all these different things that they're worried about. And a lot of sales leaders, when times aren't good and then reps aren't implementing their coaching, they lose sight that this is a job for those people, and you need to make them feel safe, and you need to be nice to them. A lot of times they just get mad and get angry, and that's not going to actually drive the behavior that you want.
So having seen both sides of the coin, managing sales teams and creating tools for sales teams, how do you feel technology is reshaping sales strategies?
So I think it's reshaping in a good way or a bad way. It's making sales easier. So it will automate sales strategies, whether it's sales process, cadences, prospecting, like whatever, making your actual email now with all these tools and ChatGPT. So it can either make you better because now you have more time to do more revenue generating activities, or you can take that automation and do less and just be lazy. So I think it's creating a bigger divide between the best reps and the best sales leaders versus the ones that aren't so great, and aren't so great because of just their mentality, which goes back to why I put so much of a focus on that.
You've worked at startups and also founded one. What are some critical lessons you've learned about sales in the startup ecosystem?
So I think with the startup ecosystem specifically, I think a lot of sales reps get into startups without really knowing the exact extent of like what you're doing at a startup. If you're getting a job at a bigger company, like let's say an Adobe or something like that, you're a part of like a real business, and you're going to get your raises and all that stuff. But when you're joining a startup, you really need to understand that like you're trying to build a business from the ground up that by default likely won't survive. And there's that sense of mentality that a lot of reps coming out of school, maybe joining as a BDR, don't necessarily understand. For example, like when you join a head of sales role at like a seed stage Series A company, your OTE is typically a third of their ARR, their revenue, right? So it's an existential crisis every single day for that company. So I think understanding that going in is something a lot of folks in startup sales don't think about, because they see the funding announcements, oh, raised 24 million. And they're like, oh, like have so much job security. I'm so safe. Why isn't this company giving me a raise? But in reality, they just raised $1 million per month if you break it down for like a 24-month runway. And that's to give them the opportunity to survive and to be a big business. So I think the biggest thing I've learned is like really just understanding the differences. Like if you want a job that's safe, like go to a bigger company. If you want the chance to build something and like be a part of like a scrappy environment, like that's who should be at a startup.
So you started this with like you spotted a challenge, saw the opportunity, built some tech. I'm downplaying obviously the effort that's gone into it. Built some tech, now kind of trying to kind of find product market fit, et cetera, et cetera. At what stage in that did you start to go, okay, here is my TAM, here is my like what it could become, here is what success looks like for me?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we recently saw is when we first started, like we were selling deals for like hundreds of dollars, right? So like an ARR would be like, hey, like sign up for $500 a year, right? And it's just like, oh, like this is a cool like side thing, and I'm solving my own problem, right? So that's all it was. And then all of a sudden, we had a customer be like, hey, like I actually want to buy this for my entire sales team, and also my head of CX wants this for their entire customer success team. And I think that moment, I think it was like our fourth customer or something like that. That was a complete stranger. It wasn't one of my buddies that I tapped on the shoulder being like, hey, do you also want this? That's when we really started to like look and be like, hey, like we should really think of this like a serious startup, because I think we have potential. And if you think about all the customer success reps, all the sales reps, even just like North America and Europe, right? Like that is an incredible addressable market. So I think that's when we first like realized it, because it really just, we kind of got pulled into it. I wasn't planning to to quit a head of sales job. That's for sure. My mom almost had a heart attack when she's like, hey, you're gonna give yourself a 4x pay cut. That was not fun.
So you oh, I had a good question there. It's totally gone out of my head. Anyway, I'll come back to that.
Yeah,
Can you give me some insight on how real-time assistants can improve key sales metrics like win rate, average contract value, and time to close?
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think the big thing is sales leaders inherently know what will improve those three metrics. They're watching calls, they're shadowing calls with their team, they're joining those, and they often have this saying in their head where they're like, hey, like if we just did X, like build a business case or book next steps at the end of the call, it would improve that metric. The problem is like, how do you actually get that done consistently? So the fact of the real time piece is when you're coaching your rep in your weekly call review session every Thursday for an hour, they might have a call next Thursday or next Tuesday. Well, they just went out for the weekend, had some drinks with their friends. They maybe went on like a little siesta Monday afternoon. Now that whole coaching session is completely in the history in the rearview mirror. When they get on that next call, that's not top of mind. So the big thing for why real-time assistants help actually drive that behavior and help drive those metrics is because it keeps the most important things top of mind when it needs to be top of mind.
So it's a combination of learn by doing coupled with theory. So you're giving them the theory at the same time that they're going to be executing on that.
Exactly.
I remembered what my question was. So when you start, so let's say the first 3 customers that you had were people that you knew or peripherally knew, so buddies you could lean on and kind of willing to take a punt. 4th customer, someone you didn't know, and then let's say the following 10 customers after that. How do you, so the companies you've worked at previously, maybe not HyperComply, but at least Vidyard, had brand awareness, they had case studies, they had a user base, and just kind of like general, like people understood who they are and what they do.
Yeah.
Again, coming back to sales software, you are in a very populated space. How do you combat that messaging that will give your buyers confidence in that very early stage when you don't have any of that yet?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is like, if you're not solving a real problem that like kind of like presses a button on someone that you can send in a cold email, you're screwed, right? Because like, to your point, like how many sales tech companies are out there right now? It's nuts. How many MarTech companies are out there? It's nuts. So I think what validated for us is we just spun up a quick outbound email campaign. Wasn't personalized or anything like that. And we just shipped it out to 1,000 people. And we used the messaging of like, hey, like, do you wish you had more time to watch call recordings, or are you wasting your time watching 10 hours of call recordings? I forget how we said it, but we said something in that lens. And we had like 30 people be like, yeah. And then from there, that's where the pipeline just started exploding. So I think if we didn't have that sense of like product market fit, like we're actually solving a problem that actually exists in the world, rather than just being another Gong or another like outreach or something like that, we would have had no shot.
It's very similar to, so Vidyard's, when we first started working with Vidyard, it was the people not responding to emails. You get a like 4x meeting booked, like if you include video, like that kind of messaging. So there's an immediate pain point, immediate solution. Drift launched one of their early campaigns was the kind of no form movement. So like understanding like, yes. And they used to paint it so a prospect comes to the landing page, they fill in a form, it goes into a lead rotation. The salesperson probably comes back in 24 hours after downloading a guide and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. They've already moved on at that point.
And I think the key thing, sorry to interject, but I think the key thing there is like, we learned that messaging from like asking our first 3 customers, how would you describe the problem we're solving? We didn't come up with that language. And the same thing with Vidyard, right? I think that's the key for anybody trying to grow their business from like an outbound perspective, is use the language that your customers are telling you, not what you think it sounds like.
With an increasingly remote work setup, how does SalesQ ensure effective collaboration and coordination within sales teams?
So I think the biggest thing, like when I was an AE, Evan Santa, the sales leader at the time who managed me, he was a big believer in like, we're all sitting at our desk beside each other and running demos. So if you took a Vidyard demo in that day, you'd have people walking by and like, we would be like on the floor. And it was kind of like an environment. And the prospects would also see that like, there's so many people taking demos right now. Like I'm missing out. There was almost like that FOMO aspect, which Evan's like really big in like sales psychology. So I thought it was really interesting. But one of the benefits from him as a sales leader was he was at his desk too. And he's listening to all the talk tracks of all his reps at one moment. So you didn't need something like a sales queue as much or things like that, because you could always hear if the team was doing it or not. And I'd even like take off my headphones and say, hey, do we do this? And a rep beside me would be like, yes or no. So it was very collaborative. Now I'm in my friggin' room with my dog, right? Like there's not like my hypothetical sales leader or our board in my situation can't hear what I'm doing on a call. When I start hiring a sales team, I don't know what they're saying. So it's really important to gain visibility in a way that's meaningful. And when I say a way that's meaningful is like, that doesn't require you to spend time watching things that have already happened. If you have to relive 20 hours of your team's calls, you might as well have just ran those calls. So I think that's the big thing.
Someone who has seen and shaped the evolution of sales software, what does the future look like for sales technology?
So I think there's a big consolidation that's happening for sure. However, I think if you look at the new paradigm shift that some of the new AI things that are coming out, I promised myself I wasn't going to say the word AI in this because it's just such a buzzword right now. But funny story, we actually started SalesQ as .io, and then a month later, like ChatGPT launched, like, oh, we have to become an AI company. So we changed the domain to .ai. But where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so big consolidation. But I think how the workflows that really matter to unlock the potential of AI for sales reps and sales leaders need to vastly change. So I think what you'll see is a lot of startups like SalesQ and other verticalized solutions tackling different areas spin up and almost have to redo the consolidation. So there's companies like Apollo out there that are kind of like compound startups trying to build like everything. I think what that compound startup will look like in 3 years from now is extremely different in just how you operate with that software.
Which part of like the tech space, other than yours, which part of the tech space are you like most interested in and like most excited about?
Sales and business development. I think, I don't know how, because it's not something that I'm so focused on yet, but I think that whole way of operating is just going to flip on its head. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's not going to look like anything like it is today. If you've seen like the Google Assistant that calls restaurants for you and books reservations, just like an AI, like there's so many things like that that are already capable in certain use cases that I think are just going to be accelerated. And it's really, really interesting, which I think is going to move the sales landscape into more of a full cycle model. Before, Salesforce and companies like that with like really big ACVs built that more specialized, where we have a BDR and an AE model. I think we're going to really accelerate towards the full cycle model now, just with the technology change that's happening.
So I had this conversation with somebody, I think while I was at Collision, where we met a couple of weeks ago as well. Saying, where did I see sales going? Is it not all going to become AI driven and just somebody's going to be buying from a chatbot? And I think there will be like some of that, obviously, like where it's click to buy stuff. Yes, absolutely. But I still think that I'm a big believer in the kind of when everybody's going left, go right. And I think that mentality. So now if I get a sales call, it's rare that I get a sales call because I'm generally not on the main line in the office and people don't generally, but if I get one, I'm actually super responsive to it. I really enjoy it. Actually, it was Rob Sale. Me and Rob Sale were having this conversation a few weeks back. And for me, like in that whole AI space, I actually think there will be a space where the human becomes more prevalent in the conversation, the research, what I think we'll see is actually just a super emphasis on the education and like development of the customers. So now we have, like, Google came into play. We then all of a sudden had all these customers who knew way more, and it became seller beware as opposed to buyer beware, and all blah, 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 blah. I think we're going to see an acceleration of that. We're going to get prospects who know more about the product because they were able to go to ChatGPT, tell me how SalesQ works, what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, and then give me a comparison to their top 10 competitors. That stuff will come through. And then as a salesperson, you're going to have to really know what you're talking about. Or I guess you could use AI at the same time and say, actually, yeah, here's our 10 weaknesses and strengths, and I can retort to all of that. But I think it's going to be an interesting space.
But I think the thing that AI just won't do is trust, right? Like people, in order to buy, like someone needs to trust the person that's selling to them, trust the company is not like a rogue agent, and trust the product's going to solve it. So I think the AI side could do the company and the product side, but I don't think like I would trust an AI to be honest with me, or like, you know what I mean? Like really know my best interest.
But it's a very kind of, this is like a drunken debate happening. We're both, I presume, sober because it's 9 o'clock in the morning for you. But would you say that the trust is less in AI than it is with a typical salesperson? Because both have that kind of, this person is trying to flog me something. This is technology, and surely it's language. The language models it's using are an amalgamation of technology. It's not making assumptions and promises it can't keep, in theory. So it's going to be a weird mix, actually. Do people trust salespeople or AI more?
I think time will tell. Time will tell.
You host the Meeting Mastery podcast. What's been the most valuable insight you've gleaned from your guests about improving sales calls?
Yeah, so I think the biggest reason why I actually started Meeting Mastery is because the tough times that are happening in the software sales ecosystem. And I feel like everybody looks at these people's LinkedIn profiles and they're like, holy shit, like I'm failing, right? Like I suck. This person, like I could never be them. But they don't realize that LinkedIn profiles are like their Instagram profile, or just the highlights. So that's why we started Meeting Mastery, is kind of like get every top sales leader, like we have KD, Scott Leese, everything like that, and just tell you the shit about their career. And then we also have like meeting tips. I think what consistently comes up that I've learned from like how to sell better is becoming an expert in your space right now, especially even what you just said about like how AI is just probably going to even accelerate this. Like if you're just coming on, understanding the high level of your product and expecting to be successful, you're screwed. Like you need to really understand, like Josh Kirkham, who I know we both know, he was famous for reading the knowledge base. Like it was like his morning reading material of Vidyard. Like he would know everything. He's not a technical guy, doesn't know how to write a line of code, but he would literally read every single knowledge base article of Vidyard. And you could tell when you're on a conversation about Vidyard with Josh, he is the expert. Like there's nobody that could sell Vidyard better. And I'm sure he's doing the same thing at HubSpot. So I think that's one of the biggest thing that kind of just, I always kind of knew subconsciously, but it really stuck out to me around like how much those top sales leaders care about product knowledge.
It's and you can tell actually. So we work a lot alongside a lot of tech salespeople, and you can really tell the ones who have gone deep, not necessarily in the tech, they've gone deep in understanding the challenges that tech can solve and some of the key pitfalls. Those are the ones that we typically see being more successful. The ones that come in and go, it can, like basically listing off the product features, it never really pans out. Yeah. If you could, this is my favorite question to ask sales leaders, is if you could build the perfect sales team, what would it look like? What key areas would you focus on to build momentum?
From a people perspective, more so. So I think the biggest thing is I would need to have a bunch of different superpowers. Like when I was building the Vidyard sales team, I would hire someone based on that core requirement. Are they self-motivated? Are they driven? Do they have clear goals? But then what are they going to bring to the team that we don't have today? So like Josh, like benchmark for work ethic. Jeremy, right, was someone that was so like organized that it would make my eyes bleed. Like I wouldn't understand how this guy uses spreadsheets and stuff like that. So I think as you're building out your sales organization to build momentum, every single person is going to have weaknesses. So if you bring on a sales team where every single person has a massive strength, you're going to be able to elevate that team without you even needing to elevate the team. It's just going to elevate themselves. And we host like weekly Wednesday, lunch and learns where each member would kind of train the team on their superpower. And we found that was an incredible way to just like develop the team overall. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think I'd really make sure we have driven people as a baseline. And then what can they bring to the team that's not already here?
What was your sales superpower?
Objection handling, by far.
How would you go into objection? Did you have some stock answers that you would adapt to the moment, or what? How would you handle that?
So I think I had a really good business acumen just in general, just from like owning my own like little side business in university. So I had an advantage compared to other peers, but I would honestly not care if they bought or not. I would really focus on like, can we help them or not? And I'd be brutally honest and just say like, hey, like I totally understand where you're coming from. I agree with you in all honesty. Like every time someone gives an objection, it is the right objection, right? Like it should be there because that's actually how they're feeling. It's from their worldview. So I wouldn't try to dismiss that. And then I would just be super candid. So I wouldn't argue with them. I would agree. And then I'd be super, super candid. And some of my peers would say sometimes people would buy and they'd be like bloody nosed and whatnot because we just had like a Elon versus Zuckerberg cage match with each other. But it was completely honest, candid, and respectful to one another. And I was just really good at making people open with me to just tell me like the real reasons why that they didn't think they should buy. And then we'd have an honest conversation. And if they didn't want to buy after because they shouldn't, then that was okay. And they kind of felt that.
Who was the better seller, you or Josh?
I'll say Josh because I let him, so I taught him everything. And then he learned more.
What's your biggest career fuck up to date?
Oh, this is a fun one. So when I was in university, I did that marketing company for real estate agents, as I mentioned. And have you ever read the book 4 Hour Workweek? Have you heard of that, Tim Ferriss? Yeah. So I read that as like a 20-year-old kid. And I took it word for word, literal. I was okay, I'm only going to work 4 hours a week for the rest of my life. I'm going to move to Thailand, which I did. And I am going to outsource everything on Upwork. Upwork's like a freelancing website. So that's what I did. Fast forward a month later, I had the folks that were working for me post the wrong ads for the wrong company. So imagine you're paying someone and using your ad budget and you're advertising your competitor in the real estate space. Not a good look. So needless to say, I got fired immediately from both of those clients, which made up 80% of the revenue.
Surely one of those clients should have been really happy.
Not because it was both. They're advertising for the competitors. So yeah, both of them fired me, which was good. Really good business move on their end. Yeah, I had to move back home, move back with my parents after I was making $100K a year as like a 20-year-old kid. Thought I was on the top of the world. Really came back to reality. And then that's when I was like, hey, like, what the hell do I want to do with my career? What am I good at? I was good at selling, wasn't good at client fulfillment and advertising. So that's when I went to Vidyard.
Nice. I like that as an origin story. It's good. Okay, last question. Who would you recommend me speaking to next?
I think Evan Santa, just on the psychology of sales. He's taught me, I'm a very process, practical person. Not to say Evan's not practical, but he really knows about the little nuances of psychology that I think can really drive deals forward and create the best customer experience overall. He's the VP of sales at Commerce Bear. Again, used to lead the department that I took over for him at Vidyard. So that's who I'd be gunning for to be on the show. Good shout.
Ryan, thanks for being up for doing the 6 sessions with me. If anyone wants to follow up with you or find out about SalesQ, how should they reach out?
Yeah, just LinkedIn. Always posting different content, and would love to chat, get everybody's feedback around what we're building.
Perfect. Thanks for joining us. See you later, everybody.
Thanks so much.